I was like a little stick being thrown by enormous forces coming down the mountains and going towards the sea. Not only could I have easily drowned, but the river was full of visible and hidden rocks. If I had hit one, I would have certainly broken an arm or a leg, or both, and I would have drowned for sure. I remember thinking, this is it. This is the end of my life.
Welcome to the Toronto Beaches Film Festival. The film is called The Horizon Behind Me. We have Roberto Pettini with us. The film has been nominated for Best Human Interest Film and Best Documentary. And welcome, Roberto Pettini.
Hello to everyone.
I feel like I know you after watching your film. Your film was made over the course of your 20s, or so to speak, kind of, and it was based on the things that you experienced in your 20s. You might almost call it a coming of age film in that respect, and that you see you sort of being transformed by your travels. I'm curious about how the film got to be made. Was it really that this was the first attempt to make the film, or did you try earlier on in your life to make something, a film of this material?
No, this was the first one. And it took us a long time to make it, about 17 years, because we did it in the spare time we had, me and David, the other co-producer. And as I mentioned, probably already in the past, it started when one day we were talking about something, and I mentioned, I know a place in the book where they do this thing in a different way, and people started to ask me questions about it. So then I was teaching at university, and one person said, look, I got a son who's really interested, would be very interested in meeting you. So one day we met, weeks later, and we decided to put this together. But it wasn't easy at the beginning, because we had to decide how to do it. And I thought that was going to be a very good opportunity for me to really see what was left in my heart and my mind after so many years, after my experience with these people in this period of 10 years between the age of 19 and 29. So I decided to basically let that come out naturally, as if I was going to ask you, for instance, Thomas, can you tell me about your first day at school or your first experience at school? So you got two choices. You can look back to what you had as a schedule, for instance, or program for school. Okay, on Monday morning we had English from 8 to 9, and then maths or whatever. Or just say what you remember. I was scared of being left alone, or I didn't like the school, or I found a lot of friends, or the teacher was a very interesting person. Whatever comes out from your memory. And by doing that, we put piece after piece this documentary, but because we did it in spare time, I had two kids, I had the mortgage, and also David was busy, so we used to meet them every now and then and move on. The most amazing thing is that it took us 16 years, 10 months, and 15 days. And the most amazing thing, Thomas, is we never, ever look back at what we had put together, assemble in the editing of the documentary. And we just went on and on and on. And one day, after so long, 16 years, 10 months, 15 days, we said, okay, let's have a look at it. And I was amazed that I didn't repeat myself, or that actually it flows really well. And that was really what I wanted to communicate about this amazing experience I had the luck to have in my life. And that was the most sort of condensed form of what I could say, doing some justice to the importance of the experience in 2 hours, 47 minutes and 20 seconds.
Even when you're saying that, for me, the audience draws conclusions from their own lives and compares. For instance, I can compare what my life was in my 20s to go back and forth. Technically, what you're saying is really interesting, because the idea, it really sounds beautiful, and it sounds like you sat there in one sitting. Are you telling me that these recordings are made over a period of 16 years?
Well, the recording was made over a period of probably 3 years, because before we had to choose the photographs and the footage we were going to include. But it actually wasn't even sort of came out spontaneously. And what I'm saying is that we never look back and say, okay, what did we say 2 weeks ago, a month ago?
I had to live in a place where our rationality was the basis for beliefs and thoughts. This I could never replace. I also realized that if I were to remain in Melanesia, I had to take a much more responsible role. Now, at the age of 29, I would not have been able to join a community without getting married and being a part of the local social network.
I would just say, okay, where did we get to? Okay, I was, the hair was, and let's continue from there. And move on without, it was like a very spontaneous way of telling you or anyone what was left in my heart and my memory. But it was amazing that even if we did it in pieces, bits and pieces here and there, it actually flows well, I think, at the end.
Oh, it's beautiful. And the music really, and the sounds, the alternate sounds that you have in through it, was that something that was your idea? Did David do that?
David was actually the one that really added bits and pieces for his decision of starting documentary with that near-death experience I had across
yes.
his idea. But Thomas, what was very important to me was that it had to be 100% real, 100% exactly what it is that world, including if you hear a bird, for instance, in Borneo, it is a bird that lives in Borneo and does exactly that sound. Everything has to be authentic. Because I remember when I was young, and this is my generation thing, but when I was young, I was a kid, I used to watch movies about, being Italian, really sort of, we had a lot of Western movies from America and so on. And I remember seeing that, there was always the cowboys, shooting the Indians, boy Indians, they'd fight between these two. And I never, ever, when I was young, seeing how they lived, how they spent their days, apart from the time when they were fighting, defending themselves against the conqueror of the West, but the conquerors of the West. But how were they? How was their daily life? And that was a lot more interesting to me than watching John Wayne shooting. And I always asked myself, I really want to know how these people that live in that world and are different than us spend their days, how they dreams, how they see and interpret life. And so when I grew up with that idea of a concept that the world was really still inhabited by people living very different ways. And I was very aware, but since very young, that we only have one shot in life. We have this ticket. And it's a matter of really making the most of it, not necessarily only in terms of comforts, but in understanding how other people live and how our ancestors live, other people adapted to the environment and finding harmony within it. I was really, really interested. And when I was able to look for myself personally for places where people were still living in a traditional way, I put that as a priority at the expense of risking, to whatever was going to happen. I had no idea. But what is very interesting is that I really, really gradually got so involved that I didn't have any real reason. I really dived into the world. Some people, when they experience similar things, they go for a period of time, or they go for a specific purpose. They want to do a PhD, or they want to convert the people, or whatever. or they want to develop it. I went as a human being, and I remember that I brought as less as possible from my world, and they didn't know anything about it. So I just tried to get into their role, as if I was born there, in a sense of understanding and wanting to be a part of such a different way of life than I was, as most of our ancestors lived in the past.
The passion that you're expressing is beautiful, because it shows that, to me, as a filmmaker, sometimes we make a film and we finish the film, we complete the film, and then we move on to the next thing. No, this is still a fire that is still burning inside of you, which is very fun to me to see in this interview. The other thing that strikes me is the story is really sort of you, which is fun for the viewer to see how you, the character, change during the course of the film. And of course, the obvious example is when you see the woman who is your age, who is sitting in Calcutta and is dying for no other reason than that economic and cultural reasons, she's dying. And then you sort of described your reaction to this, because in the film you're very upset and you need to save this woman. And you described your reaction as silly, naive, and stupid. To try to save this woman, and that's a really powerful moment. Can you talk a little bit more about how you reached the idea that to save this woman was naive and stupid?
Actually, it was a very shocking, one of my first experiences, as I mentioned in Dhaka. It was a real confrontation between the world where, I don't know about you, but I think, as in a sort of in the developed world, we know that it's almost impossible to die of hunger. So, even in the worst case, if you lose whatever, you will find something to put here and then in your stomach and survive. The confrontation of a person of my age who had already lost most of her family, or perhaps all of it, and to confront the fact that she didn't want to die as a dog, begging for last pieces of rice in the footpath, and got to a point where she knew that she had no options instead, and except waiting for it in the most possible peaceful way, in front of an entire city like Calcutta, where people were moving around like if she was invisible. For me, it was just amazing. And being born in Rome and from a Catholic family, you have this immediate instinctive reaction of wanting to help someone. It's not that difficult to understand that she could be, she's another human being, and you could do something about it. But the confrontation was all of that in front of someone who get to a point where she got to, and a culture that helped her to get to a point where I prefer, and I have no choices, but I prefer to die in dignity instead of begging for the last few breaths or whatever. And that was another way of, again, confronting a very different culture. So the trip was really a trip into other worlds. I remember that one day was sitting in the jungle in Borneo, and I asked myself, what exists here that exists in the world where I come from Rome? And I told them here and that and this and that. And at the end, my answer was nothing. Even the water I was drinking tastes like the jungle. I had a taste of thousands of plants, thousands of animals that were all around me. And even the air was breathing, had a different smell. So nothing was the same. So for me, it was like really taken a rocket and landed on a different planet, where every day I had to learn and understand how that world was and is, and the people in there, and myself in it. So it was and it kind of need to move in number of journeys or trips all at once. And I also remember that a few years ago, I just here in my mind, I really asked myself, but look, can you compare how much you lived as an essence of living our life when I was there, and the life I have here in Sydney? I teach at university. I have 2 kids, and in terms of, let's say, emotions, feelings, learning in a generic sense, I could compare it. The day there with them was like 5 years. Yeah, it's 5 years. So imagine I spent 10 years living in different parts and different cities. So that makes me so passionate, as you mentioned to me. And the fact that I had the opportunity to do that just in time, and to see all the other possible Robertos that were there. You know, Thomas, you never asked to go in Canada, or as a white person, or whatever you are, or whatever you are. And the only way to find out who you could have been, if by chance you were born in Congo or Mongolia, on a little island in the middle of the ocean, where people see and conceive the world as islands. They ask me, you know, and it's a metaphor too. We are all islands in many ways in our journey through life.
It's so beautiful because it's powerful to develop to any culture. When I go into Trenton, when I go into the art world in New York, when I discover a whole universe inside of Staten Island or something, a whole different way of living that we can all relate to. It's just beautiful. Do you ever sense that anyone from Obola Bula could take the opposite journey and come to see our culture and see it in the way that you saw their culture?
I think that the fragility of these communities and people is that they're really not prepared to understand and to see at the beginning how complex our world is. So in many ways, they're really, really fragile and subject to all sorts of force. So no, I don't. But I think I can imagine in some ways how, as I mentioned at the end, one using the other eye that I have, I can sort of imagine few ways of looking at our world from their point of view. But no, as a full kind of answer, no, definitely I got.
And what do you think that says about our culture? Is that a flaw in our culture that it can't be seen in that way?
They have a very, very different relationship with the natural world that we don't really have. They depend on it, and that world is magic. So we don't interpret our natural world as magic at all. Perhaps religious, but it's a different thing. It's a totally different way. There's a form of connection that they have and respect that for us, in the best cases, is intellectual, but it's not a part of our makeup. We don't feel it generally. It's very difficult for us to really, or we do feel it perhaps really strongly, but to really feeling connected to the extent that your life depends on it.
To me, it begs the question of who has the fragile culture here. Maybe it is our culture that is fragile, and theirs is less fragile, simply for the reasons that you're mentioning.
For instance, in Australia, something really big happens. The Aboriginal people will be the only ones surviving. They not, but they're not survive. Even in the desert, most of us in Sydney would better die. We couldn't find a way. There's no way.
I know you have a very limited time here, but I wanted to ask you, how many of these people did you keep in touch with? I know there's the beautiful woman from Ubula Bula, E.Q. Batma, that you mentioned very fondly, who wound up naming her first child a similar name as yours. But did you manage to keep in touch with the people that you saw all those years ago?
I wanted, and one thing that's very, very important that is actually common within all the communities I live with, is that you must return in your life what you receive. Not necessarily material things, but in terms of health or in any form of shape. So I had this step particularly with a group of Aka people living. Sorry. So one day when my children were grown up, and 2 years ago, I decided to find a way to get and return what I owed. And it wasn't easy. Eventually, one day I found where one member of the family was still living. And this is an amazing story because her name is Ati, and it's actually in the documentary. So imagine I finally arrived with him, and I then called her Ati, and she came. Now very old. And when she arrived, I said, Ati, I'm so happy I found you. I haven't seen you for 40 years. I'm so glad I could get it. She said, she could not pronounce it. So Roberto. My name is Roberto. So Roberto, she said to me in other language, come down, Roberto. But I haven't seen you for so long. I can't come down. So she sat down, I sat down, and the first thing she said to me was, you could probably be surprised, but I'm also surprised to see you. And I said, of course I am. Come down. I tell you what, 7 days ago, I had a dream, and you were coming back with your wife after so long, and today is the 7th day. And I said, no way. So I asked the people around, I said, are you are the person that he said you were coming back today? And I said, wow, Ati, this is an example of how the cultures can be.
We do have a couple of audience questions. One question is, how did your journey change when your brother joined you? Did it bring you closer together? Was he up for the level of, let's say, the level of lacking of modern inconveniences? Please tell us a little bit how that changed when your brother joined you in your travels.
It happened after 5 years, and Marco was still is assistant director, so he had very different experience of mine. In fact, he brought it in the body camera, very difficult. But it also was different in terms of course, personality and character. But I was so fascinated by the fact that when they wrote this letter, which arrived as a month later, saying to him, I think I will never come back. I am so taken by what I'm living. Now I'm living. Marco was one of the 16 families seen the logo. And Marco was one sharing the room. He's so human. And he's also doing his own. So we grew up together, and he knew that if I mentioned something like that, obviously was going to be extraordinary. So he came, and gradually he adjusted, and he saw the depth and the richness of the experience, and gradually actually melted and joined me fully as the time went by. But it wasn't easy for him. He had the advantage of having lived already for many years with different people, but also was really my passion that he had to share with me. And he was with me trying to feel as I was feeling, but wasn't his kind of natural inclination or interest in doing something like this. So we balanced and harmonized all of that as the time went by. And at the end, we were just really together on the same canoe, paddling, me on one side, him on the other.
Can you tell us about percentage-wise? Could you kind of break down how many time, what the percentage was that you were behind the camera, and what the percentage of the time maybe Marco was behind the camera getting the film footage?
Marco filmed 99.9% of the times. I just
Oh my.
sometimes when the shot when Michael was drinking the camera is the one that I took. I was the one taking photographs and doing the recording and acting writing a diary basically. Yes. Which I never ever even opened. Still today, I never ever read it again yet. Because I wanted, as I mentioned to Thomas at the beginning, I wanted to just see what came out naturally from me.
Is that 99% of you behind the camera that took the still photographs then?
Yes. No, that's me. Only I was the only one taking the still photograph.
Incredible. Why was the box of photographs hidden for 25 years? Was it just you traveling around the world? Can you give us a little insight about why it was hidden and how it was unearthed, how you found them again?
No, but what we did is because the film needed to be developed is every now and then when we had the opportunity to do a mission events where we somehow send this stuff, even if it took sometimes a long time to Rome, we developed. And our father was in Rome, so he developed the film and the photographs and put them all into this famous box. But what happened is that I mentioned this in the document, it's fortunately still very true. When you leave something so different, then you try to share it with other people, unless it's absolutely real personal interest. Generally speaking, my best friends, even my family, even people who love me very much, in reality, after 5 or 10 minutes, and this is exceptional to Naïve would be that you're so interested. I really learned as the time went by that because of the difficulty in entering to tell us all the experiences, they were not really interested. So I didn't know what to do with this stuff. So it was left in the box only because I could not use it. I could not do anything with it except leave it there until the story I just mentioned to Thomas before, that one day the class, she had a son who was interested in meeting me, and it was David, and from there together eventually. But I don't know if you experienced the same thing, but in reality, after asking me generally questions such as how terrible was the food, or beautiful were the girls, or how strange were some customs, people prefer to go back and talk about match last week, or have you heard about the cost of the bottle of milk rising? So our world is definitely dominant, and apart from curiosity and all friendly interest into your experiences, there is a very, very, very clear blockage there, impossibility to share with other people your experiences. Look, honestly, between me and you, my son is 32, my daughter is 34. They never, ever, ever asked me yet anything about this experience. And they love me very much, and I love them very much. So it's nothing to do with it.
Incredible, incredible. Roberto, your father was a filmmaker. Did you both continue in filmmaking after this incredible journey that you had?
No, I used to, my father helped me in getting some work to be able to get some money to do my travels in the film industry. But Marco, yes, was an assistant director and is still an assistant director in the industry. It's 5 years. In between, Marco went back to the Indian, looking while to really into the way of life he used to have before he joined me. But and they paid a big price. It was he had difficulties in rejoining it for a number of years, but now he's back into the industry and he lives in Rome. And he also treasure, of course, the experience. The first people like saw them finished. And he just put his eyes open at the end, just he said, thank you. That's all he said.
Roberto, I have one question, semi-related. Is there anything that was difficult to relive when creating this film? Is there any memories that were particularly challenging for you to access?
The magic thing of putting the documentary together was that every time David and I were sitting together, and David is a lot younger than me, for me it was an opportunity to really enter that world. So I felt again the pain of that experience in Kakala, for instance, Thomas, you mentioned that one. And many other moments that were so intense in my life. And I was really happy to be able to retravel from a different perspective, because now I was from here and I was a lot older. Well, and how I lived that period of my life. And I felt all the emotions. And I also, as I mentioned in the document, were moments where I reached a level of happiness that I never ever had reached before. And it was just so intense. So I was touched again by a number of same emotions that I felt. So it was perhaps a little bit of magic that they also left in me, all these experiences.
Well, as a viewer, there was plenty of magic spread to us as well. It was a beautiful experience, and part of it made me want to see more. I wanted to see maybe some of the stories that you had maybe given one example of a story, and maybe there were more examples of these stories. Also, is there any talk about doing any more work of this type, or maybe a sequel? What happened to your life when you returned? Things like that.
Thank you, Thomas, for the question. The difficulty was, in fact, in selecting and choosing. Well, even if it was such a natural process in telling the story to David, while we were putting it together and editing, but that is a fragment of the 10 years. So even in terms of material, I have thousands of photographs, hours and hours of not in the documentary, and of footage. So there was just a selection of a small part that was enough to say what I wanted to say. But yes, definitely there is a. Now, I don't think I will, Thomas, because I don't think I have another 17 years of time and David to that we can spend by doing this again. So I knew this in some ways that I wanted to. It's like you wanted to have this journey, and now this trip is finished, and it's been another trip in my life making it.
If someone from a network wanted to come to you and say, oh, we want to make this into a series, a whole 26 episodes or something, it sounds like that could be something that you could be twisted into saying yes to, perhaps.
Who knows? But it's, yeah, well, I don't know, but could be if in a very interesting way, and could help in, to share the value of the experience with other people. And even also, yes, I would definitely be interested if that would be the reason why the target here.
Such a beautiful story, and it's so rich. And like I said, watching this story, we can relate it to anybody. I think can relate it to their own lives. And I think it was just congratulations on creating such a wonderful film, and best of luck to wherever it takes you. It's really beautifully put together. I really loved all the pieces that David brought to it as well, where he created the story from the drowning incident and managed to get all the things together, and the sound was just beautiful.
I would like to thank everyone as well, please, for waiting for me to appear, and I hope I was able to answer your questions, number one, and number two, to share with you a bit of these emotions that I felt and this world that is around us and was around us as well. Okay. And then a good day or a good night.